Hi there, I'm TV and radio presenter Michelle Ackerley, and I am delighted to welcome you to Simply Health's Your Mind and Nature event this evening in honour of Mental Health Awareness Week. We'll be hearing from some inspirational experts and individuals, including mental health champion Harry Judd, a member of the hugely successful bands McFly and McBusted, and author of Get Fit and Get Happy. We also have psychologist and broadcaster Dr. Linda Papadopoulos on board, one of the most well-respected psychologists working in the UK today. Dr. Linda has built an outstanding reputation in both academia and broadcasting. In her 20 years as a chartered psychologist, she's gained extensive experience in the counselling of individuals, couples and families, and has headed successful postgraduate and doctoral programmes in psychology. And finally, we'll hear from Chris O'Sullivan, Head of Communications and Fundraising in Scotland and Northern Ireland for the Mental Health Foundation. Chris's background is in mental health policy, research and campaigns, basically joining the dots and translating mental health concepts for different audiences. Now, during this session, you'll have the opportunity to hear about some of the panellists' own personal journeys with mental health and how they manage any challenges they face. We'll also be discussing the link between nature and our mental health and getting some advice from Dr. Linda and Harry on how we can make the most of the natural world to benefit our minds. So make sure you stay tuned right to the very end when you'll have the chance to submit your questions for our panellists in a Q&A session. So why are we here this evening? Well, good health isn't just in the body, it's in the mind too. And unfortunately, mental ill health is really common, with rates of anxiety and depression on the rise. This has been amplified by the ongoing pandemic, which has dramatically changed the way we work, the way we live and socialise. For instance, a survey undertaken by Simplyhealth in 2020 revealed that 42% of UK adults felt their mental health had suffered since the outbreak of COVID-19. But did you know that bringing nature into your daily life can make a difference to your mental well-being? In fact, there's an abundance of research out there which shows that the natural world plays a significant role in supporting mental health, from reducing stress and easing anxiety to increasing positivity and inspiring creativity. That's why Simplyhealth has teamed up with Harry and the Mental Health Foundation to launch the Take a Breath campaign, which aims to raise awareness of the ways in which bringing nature into our lives can make a difference to our mental well-being. As part of this campaign, Harry has created a 30 days of nature activity checklist in partnership with Simplyhealth, which offers a host of ideas for interacting with the natural world. And this has been published within a new ebook titled Take a Breath, Your Mind and Nature, which is packed full of advice, exercises and activities to inspire readers to connect with nature. And it's free to download from the Simplyhealth website now. For each download of the new Take a Breath ebook, Simplyhealth will donate £5 to the Blue Prescribing project. This is a joint project between the Mental Health Foundation and the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. Now I'm going to hand over to our inspirational panellists this evening, all of whom are extremely passionate about promoting mental health awareness and have lots of advice to share with you this evening. Now I'll hand over to our inspirational panellists this evening, all of whom are extremely passionate about promoting mental health awareness and have lots of advice to share with you this evening. Harry, Linda, lovely to chat to you both. Harry, if it's okay for me to come to you first, can you just talk us through your own personal journey with mental health and what challenges you faced?
Yeah, for sure. So I personally have experienced anxiety, which I know is sort of closely linked with all sorts of other types of mental health. But for me, it really was, anxiety. And I was about 19. People often ask me, oh, was it hard to open up, and did it help when you open up and what have you? But to be honest, it was quite an intense experience, to the point where I, immediately opened up. I needed help, and there's been several things over the years that have helped me to sort of rehabilitate, I guess, or for want of a better word. But one of those things has been looking after my mental well-being in terms of, you know, my health, my exercising, regular sleep, you know, getting into a good pattern of sleeping, looking after my nutrition, and just generally being aware of, you know, stresses and things that are surrounding me in life. But, you know, if I'm completely honest, there's been times where I've been on medication as well. I've required that sort of support as well. You know, I have people close to me that have found talking therapy really helpful as well. But yeah, for me personally, it was mainly anxiety. It's something that it can be incredibly isolating. It can be very overwhelming. You feel like you're the only person going through it. You feel that when you're in it, you feel that you're never going to get better. You can't see a way out. You can't see how you're ever going to feel better. It's incredibly frightening. But there are many ways to get out of it and many ways to help yourself. And that's obviously why we're here today, to share experiences, share our wealth of knowledge, not from me, but and hopefully help, you know, lots of people out there to improve their mental well-being and mental health.
You're totally right. And this is why, as you said, Harry, speaking out about it is so important. And that word anxiety, so many of us can relate to it. But I'd like to understand more about how it manifested itself for you. Was it something that affected you day to day or every morning, evening? You know, were you hiding it from people in plain sight, as it were? How was it?
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things. When I find I have like acute episodes, yeah, I find mornings most difficult, but it was pretty much a constant thing. You know, it affected my sleep, and yeah, it was a constant thing. You know, we've all felt nerves and things, but and we say, "Oh, I'm anxious about that," but it can be a really intense thing that can, you know, affects your appetite, affects your mood, affects your, you know, all sorts of things. And it's very, very, you know, it's a lot to take on. And certainly, yeah, I've hidden it in plain sight. Like I've had to just somehow get through some really like intense moments in my career, like pressure wise, where I've been going through anxiety, and you just somehow do get through. And thankfully, you know, like I said, I've experienced these acute episodes that thankfully I've always found the way out, you know, and then managed to have at times several years of being absolutely feeling great and totally unaware of what I'd been through in the past. You know, that's what's amazing. You can go through these really difficult times, and then in the future, you can't even connect with those feelings, you know. So that's I think a really positive thing to be able to say to people, that although you may feel really in the depths of it, there is a way out, and there's a better future than what you'd experienced before.
And what would you say then, Harry, has really helped you and continues to help you? You say you know, you like exercising and keeping fit, going outdoors. How does that really bring positivity into your life?
I think, you know, keeping myself busy, but in productive ways. You know, it's very easy to get into, when you feel okay, to get into bad habits of kind of just, you know, I don't know, just like eating not so well and just watching too much Netflix and just sort of, you know, just getting a bit lazy, going to bed too late. And, you know, and I know these sound like really minor things, but, you know, for me, I find that giving my brain like variety, whether that be, you know, exercise, playing my drums, you know, reading, you know, changing those cognitive like outputs, and not just kind of getting stuck in a rut of just like staring at TV, doing work, getting up at the last minute, you know, grabbing a quick breakfast, doing work, feeling stressed, going home, trying to switch off by watching TV. You know, I've gotten into that rut before, you know, and I don't think that can build up and up and up. And then before you know it, something can kind of tip you over the edge. So just trying to be disciplined with routine and stuff. And, you know, it seems like I still have times where it's hard to motivate yourself, but you never regret doing things that are essentially good for your well-being, you know.
Yeah, that's very true. And Dr. Linda, just to bring you in here, listening to Harry there and talking about how debilitating anxiety can be, but also thinking through those things that can help you overcome that. What would your insight be on this?
You know, anxiety, I guess, in its basest form is the idea that something's going to happen in the future and I won't be able to cope. So when we speak about stress, what is stress? What is anxiety? It's actually the difference between the resources that I think I have and the thing I'm going to have to cope with. So it's that kind of space in between. So there's two things that we can do. We can either kind of develop the resources. So Harry's kind of pointing out some really wonderful things. When people sit in my office, I always speak about the basics first. Eat, sleep, move. And that sounds really simple, but as he points out, it makes sense for a lot of reasons. We know that routine, we're creatures of habit, that really helps. Why does that help? Because the expectation of what you're going to do next is there. That's very containing. We know now that if we're eating the right foods, the microbiome in our stomach that affects our nervous system, that affects our biochemistry, that's kind of something that's able to kind of regulate in a more positive way. We know if we move, and we're not just talking about endorphins, I'm talking about the basics of kind of going for a walk outside. It's kind of leaving the screens that we've all been attuned to. That makes a big difference. It allows us to connect with nature. We know that this has an effect on even parts of the brain that allow us to ruminate, like the prefrontal cortex. We're learning all this now. Wonderful. Sleep. Back in the day when I was studying to be a psychologist, we'd always ask about sleep in relation to depression and anxiety, thinking that depression and anxiety cause sleep disturbance. We now know that sleep disturbance feeds into depression and anxiety. So getting those three basics right is fundamental. But then beyond that, it's also about kind of looking at what are those thought patterns that are kind of increasing in our anxiety. And one of the ones that, I come across time and time again is this need for certainty, right? It's this need for control. So as long as I'm sure that everything's going to work out the way that I want, then I can relax. Of course, there's no way we can ever be certain of things happening, right? That's just that's in fact the only certainty of life, that things will blindside us. So instead, kind of having an understanding where we're able to tolerate uncertainty, but also react to that uncertainty in a more logical, I guess, almost scientific way. So again, I always speak about the difference between reacting to possibility versus probability. So we're all sitting here now having this discussion, and it's possible that an earthquake could happen and we'd have to stop talking, but none of us are thinking about that because it's a tiny remote possibility. When we're anxious though, we kind of inflate that possibility. We go on probability, right? So we kind of inflate it. So the point is we need to look at what is likely to happen as opposed to what may happen. And the other thing that I would say, again, especially when it comes to anxiety, there's something really nourishing about trying to stay in the present. I think the reason we've had so much talk about mindfulness and things like that is because it allows us to engage fully with what we're doing now rather than having this anticipatory anxiety of what may go wrong. So I think if you can get sort of the basics right, if you can learn to kind of challenge those cognitive distortions, and if you can go on probability versus possibility when it comes to what you're worrying about, then it'll stand you in good stead.
I think that's really good advice. And, as we said, anxiety and feeling apprehensive is something we've all been feeling more and more of during the pandemic. Harry, just to come back to you, how have you found the past year, and what do you do day to day to keep yourself in the present?
Yeah, good question. I mean, past year, well, it's been very strange. It's been like for personally, like career-wise, it's been frustrating, but it's been, I think particularly at the beginning and still having those moments, feeling quite, emotionally overwhelmed by what like people have had to go through. I remember particularly at the beginning, like feeling, just quite, emotional of seeing all the scenes unraveling on the news and being stuck in our houses and coming out on Thursday evenings with our neighbors, and this strange sense of togetherness as well. And and then now seeing what's been happening in India and now the Philippines, it makes it very hard to complain about your own personal situation. But having said that, a lot of people have had a very difficult year. Whether that's been due to financial stresses because of the pandemic, which can cause stress and mental health problems, whether that's, the feeling of being locked up and not seeing loved ones and family and friends. But yeah, me personally, I think, exercise again has always been, it's something that I can always rely on, it's something that's always there. And I, find it, even on tough days, it always lifts my mood. And routine, as Linda was reiterating what I'd said, it's so important for me. I try and go to bed roughly around the same time every night when, when I'm obviously haven't been gigging for the past 2 years, but yeah, even on tour, I try to go to bed. I try to settle down after shows, go to bed, get up, do some exercise, get into a good routine. And I feel so much better for it. And I enjoy my job so much more because I feel fresh and happier. And, so yeah, it's been a challenging year, but I've got children as well. So you kind of have to focus on them. But there's all sorts of things you can do. And I think, thank God we at least had an hour outside during that first lockdown. That was the savior.
Absolutely. And I'm sure getting out and about with your kids, just being in nature, is a wonderful experience. And just coming back to you, Dr. Linda, this link between nature and our mental health can't be underestimated, can it? Because I know myself, if I'm feeling down or incredibly anxious, getting outside, breathing in the fresh air, whether that's for 5 minutes or 5 hours, really does make a difference.
It really does. And in fact, we're getting sort of an increasing amount of research now to attest to that. There's actually a scientific field called ecotherapy that's evolving. And it's kind of looking at why, because anecdotally, we've heard this a lot. People always say, well, I feel better when I've been out in nature. So we haven't exactly pinpointed why, but we have some ideas. So there was a study done about 6 years ago, back in 2015, where a bunch of researchers looked at healthy people's brains after they walked for about an hour and a half. And they looked at whether they walked in a natural setting or an urban one. And they found that people that walked in nature, as I was saying earlier, had lower activity in the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is the part of the brain that's active during rumination. And when I say rumination, I mean, it's those sticky negative thoughts. When you get that thought in your head of like, oh, and you can't let it go. Maybe it was an interaction with a friend, or maybe it was something that you're worried about, but it's that thought that won't leave your mind. Actually, walking in a natural setting seems to help with that. The other thing that we know, for example, is that the hormone cortisol, which tends to happen in the fight or flight response, right? So when you're feeling very anxious, we know that it calms that. In fact, an even more recent study found that just listening to nature sounds allows us to kind of calm that brain activity, focus direction into our self-directedness inwards, and lower those cortisol levels. And again, even those of us that can't get outside or that kind of work or live in the city, actually just listening to the sounds, even if you're not there, can still have a positive effect.
I think that's really good advice, actually. I do that now before bed. I'll put on an app and listen to kind of bird sounds or nature sounds, and it really does help me to calm down. Harry touched on it before, it's been a difficult time with the pandemic. Everyone's been having their own experiences, some worse than others. A lot of people have been experiencing anxiety. Have you got any kind of really accessible top tips, Dr. Linda? Because sometimes I feel like you want to make a change, but actually it feels like there's quite a high barrier to entry. You might be thinking, I'm too busy today, or actually I just want to hide under a duvet, or you'll just say to yourself, I'm too anxious, I'll start tomorrow. What would you say to, that part in your mind that's thinking, I just don't feel up to doing it?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'd say is that you need to remember that the underside of anxiety is avoidance, right? So when we're anxious, we're much more likely to avoid. And that's great in the short term, right? Because I'm worried about something, I avoid it and I feel okay. But what happens in the long term is the more that I avoid, the more difficult it is to actually re-engage. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but in those moments where you are anxious and you don't want to connect with people and you don't want to go out, it's when you probably should connect. You should speak about your problems. You should do the thing that's sort of that's worrying you, and do it in a controlled manner. So I think that's the first thing I'd say. The next thing that I'd say, apart from, again, the basics of eat, sleep, and move, is about curating your consciousness. I'm really big on this. I do a lot of work on how the online world affects our mental health as well. Thoughts are not these intangible things, right? We know that kind of being around people that are talking about negative things will bring you down. Listening to negative news stories will bring you down. Well, COVID, in a lot of ways, was kind of the holy trinity of threats, right? It was uncertain, which we spoke about, which was a big issue. It was novel. We didn't know how to deal with it. So it kind of, for that reason, we felt very kind of insecure around it as well. And we'd never seen it before. So I think because of that, we need to kind of be able to deal with our anxiety in terms of focusing on what we can control and letting go of the things that we can't, because novelty, threat, and uncertainty really kind of work together to make us feel sort of overwhelmed. So what we can do is be able to spot stress. And I think a lot of people listening today might think, well, what does it look like? Well, it might look like irritation. It might look like, feeling nervous or angry. It might look like a lack of motivation, right? It might look like having trouble sleeping. So catch it when you see it. And then you need to be able to ensure that you have a sense of entitlement over your mental health. One of the reasons I'm delighted to be speaking today is because I've been a psychologist for such a long time, and I can't tell you how many people sit across from me, and the first thing they do is often apologize for being there. Oh, I know I should be able to cope. Oh, I know people have it way worse than me. Well, of course, and we can always find someone that has it way worse. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't pause and try and help yourself. But you need to have that sense of entitlement. And there's things that we can do that are very basic. I think the most fundamental for me is catching those thoughts, catching those negative thoughts, and kind of being able to challenge them. This all or nothing thinking, I need things to be perfect or things are going to be terrible, the catastrophizing. And I think finally and critically, we're social beings. We're not made to go through life alone. So the notion that we protect our loved ones when we don't tell them, I'm not so sure is true. I think seeking help from those around us, from our GPs, from amazing organizations like we're speaking about today, I think all makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. And Harry, just listening to Dr. Linda there, does that information resonate with you, catching those negative thoughts and speaking out, just being more open about how you're feeling?
Yeah, definitely. I think, that comes more naturally to some people than others. And I think particularly in the years gone by, there was a lot more taboo, people, it's very frightening, mental health. I've been through it, and I would much rather have a physical thing that people can see, because then it's you're just dealing with pain. Obviously that is dependent on how extreme that example would be, but it's very hard to explain. I've been there where people just sort of say, oh, don't worry, you'll be all right, mate, and you seem all right. Well, you seem fine to me, and let's go do this, that'll make you feel better. And you're just thinking, my God, like, this is so frightening, because I feel so like that you just literally don't understand what this is like. So yeah, absolutely resonate with it. And it's but thankfully it's huge part of the conversation now, which is really promising. And I think a lot of the people I speak to, like when we're on tour and stuff and meeting fans over the years, like it's really sad to see the amount of people. Obviously a lot of our fans are, over the years would be teenage girls, seeing a lot of the issues that they'd have and talk to us about, and whether mental health problems or insecurities. And, it's really upsetting. And I think it's great to see that there's a lot more out there to be able to support teenagers, young adults, whatever age you are, really, in these struggles that unfortunately can be, inevitable for some people.
It's great to see, and you're incredibly active within that, aren't you? Because you're involved within Simplyhealth UK. Tell us a bit more about what you're doing, the Take a Breath campaign and the Simplyhealth app.
Yeah, exactly. So, as you said, the Simplyhealth have collaborated with them on their Take a Breath campaign. They've got the Simply Me app, which has all sorts of, advice for people when they go on the app on ways to help their mental well-being, their mental health. And also we've created an ebook, which is available to download for free on simplyhealth.co.uk. And also it's worth adding that for every ebook that is downloaded, Simplyhealth are donating £5 to the Mental Health Foundation, which is great. So yeah, on the ebook, there's some of my own personal stories, anecdotes, some tips, some fun advice, all sorts of things about, reconnect with nature, exercise. So hopefully people can, explore those options and gain some good benefits there.
And finally, just to the two of you, Harry, what is your, most favourite way of reconnecting with nature? Whether that's sitting on a park bench and reading a book or going for a 10K walk, what's the best for you?
Personally, my favourite thing to do is going for a run, being on holiday in the UK on the coast somewhere. You'll see why it has to be the UK in a minute. On a hot day, ideally, going for a run, feeling pretty exhausted, really hot, and then just going into the freezing cold sea and just sort of like floating around in the freezing cold sea. It's honestly, there's nothing quite like it. It's may sound strange to some people, but it's a really exhilarating feeling.
No, that sounds delightful.
No better way to like reconnect with nature, suddenly just being in the freezing cold ocean, and then your body kind of adapts to the temperature, and it's a really exhilarating feeling. And then you've got the endorphins from the run, and it's one of my favorite things to do, actually.
I like it. Harry, I must try it. And Dr. Linda, finally, what about you?
I was just listening to Harry. So my mother swims all year round. They're in Cyprus, and there's a whole group now, and it's sort of, and exactly as you say, she speaks about that invigoration, but also I think it's that kind of the lead up to it, right? And I think so.
Yeah.
For me, I'm much less athletic than you both, so for me though, it is the lead up. I love my walks, and there's a park nearby, and you know what? I love doing them with friends. I think that's the other thing as well. I love just kind of walking and talking in a non-purposeful way. I think with this whole thing with Zoom and having every conversation be purposeful is really like not necessarily the best. So kind of just, having that moment where you chat about everything and nothing in nature really helps me.
So guys, we're going to be back very shortly. Since we came on air, we've had lots of questions coming through, which I'm going to put to both of you. So stay put. We'll be back with you very soon. Before we move on to the live Q&A, Chris O'Sullivan from the Mental Health Foundation is here to tell us more information about the Mental Health Foundation and the Blue Prescribing project and what the foundation is hoping to achieve through this initiative. So, Chris, can you tell us a bit more about the Mental Health Foundation as a whole?
Sure. The Mental Health Foundation is a UK-wide mental health charity with a mission to deliver good mental health for all. We focus on prevention. That means increasing access to the things that support and protect our mental health and reducing the impact of the things that put us more at risk of developing mental health problems. We use evidence to develop community programs focusing on those in most need, such as the people who'll be using the Blue Prescribing project, and accessible public health campaigns like Mental Health Awareness Week, which we started and it's now in its 21st year. Importantly, we also campaign to change public policy because whilst there are things we can all do to improve our mental health, if we're going to tackle the root causes of mental health problems, we need governments to act and society to change.
Now, the pandemic has been a difficult time for so many people, hasn't it, Chris? Just how has it affected people's mental health?
Well, during the pandemic, public health has become something we're much more familiar with. The idea that we can prevent or reduce our risk of developing a health issue, and the idea that some people are more at risk than others. But it's also created a huge public mental health challenge and an opportunity to talk more about mental health at home and in our working lives. Throughout the pandemic, we've been researching the impact of it on people's mental health. Right the way back from March, we've been doing polling and we have 10 waves of data now. It's taken its toll, and whilst many people have coped well, some groups haven't, and they are the groups that are already most at risk. And as we come out of the pandemic, we're also finding that they're the groups that are recovering most slowly. So that's where we're going to be focusing our support and our activities during that recovery.
Can you tell us more about the link between nature and our mental health?
Sure. We've picked the theme for mental health awareness this week as nature, because we always try and pick a topic that people can relate to. And during the long months of the pandemic, millions of us turned to nature as a way of coping with the stress that we were experiencing. Our research showed that 45% of people had spent time in green spaces or out walking as a way of coping with pandemic stress. And wider studies have found that people not only spent more time in nature, but they were noticing it more. The research we've published this week shows that the quality of our relationship with nature is what matters. making a true connection, whether that's outside, at home, or even watching nature films or making art. Nature is so central to our psychological and emotional health that it's almost impossible to realize good mental health for all without a greater connection to the natural world. 75% of UK adults we polled for Mental Health Awareness Week told us that being in nature improved their mood, but still not enough of us feel that we can get quality time in nature to help our mental health. And that's why we're campaigning for better access and more green spaces and blue spaces in our public areas. With the challenges of last year, there couldn't be a more important time to understand the link between nature and mental health. And that's why we chose it for Mental Health Awareness Week.
Yeah, I definitely think being out in nature improves my mental health for one, absolutely. And can you tell us a bit more about the project that Simplyhealth is supporting?
Yeah, we're really excited to be working with Simplyhealth, and the work we're doing will help more people to experience the benefit of our natural surroundings. So every time you download the excellent new ebook, Take a Breath, from the Simplyhealth site, you'll trigger a donation to something called the Blue Prescribing Project, which is a joint project we're doing with the Mental Health Foundation and the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. And the aim of this initiative is to tackle poor mental health through hands-on nature-based activities. We're going to bring 300 people from those communities most affected by the pandemic to come together, firstly at the Trust's wetland centres in London and Somerset, and later through online peer support. I hope you get a chance to read the ebook and that it provides you with helpful tips to look after your mental health, as well as some ideas and inspiration for how to embrace the positive impact of even small opportunities to connect with nature.
Chris, great talking to you, and please stick around because since we came on air, we've had loads of questions come through for yourself, but also Harry and Linda. So we're going to get stuck into those now. Harry, I'll come to you first if that's all right. This is a question from Dan who says, do you have any tips for new dads struggling to cope?
Well, I'd say that it's a lot of me repeating myself, really. I think, for me, sleep is a really big thing. And thankfully, my wife was, incredibly supportive and capable. And we sort of got into a routine where she would do the nights and then I'd get up, sort of 6 in with our baby and let her then sleep because she managed to be able to cope with that a bit better. So, I'd say if you can, asking for support, whether that's from family, don't be afraid to ask for support. I think, again, trying to get back into those good habits, good routines, sleep, eat, and if you can, find the time for some exercise. But I think it's perfectly natural. It's quite an overwhelming experience becoming a dad. There's so much build up and expectation, and but it's very normal. I see it a lot of the time with friends and stuff, and with mums and dads. Are you going to be good enough? Are you going to do the right thing? But the fact that you're even worrying about that shows that you care and that you will do the right thing and you will be a great dad. So don't put pressure on yourself. None of us, I may come across like on social media like I'm nailing it, but I'm not. There's constant shouting goes on in our house and then apologizing and crying, and it's stressful.
It's all perfectly normal.
Yeah, go easy on yourself.
Thanks, Harry. And Linda, we've got one for you from Sarah that says, what mental well-being help can GPs offer?
GPs can offer several things. I think the first thing that they can offer is a safe place for you to kind of articulate the problem, right? Before we can, we feel entitled to kind of have a solution, we need to articulate a problem. So a good GP will give you that space to do that. Now, depending on your GP, they may have a locum counselor that comes in so they can put you on a list to be able to get therapy right away. If they feel that you need psychopharmacological help, so if they feel that you perhaps would need some regulation with medication, they'd be able to do that themselves, or even get you a psych consult. Or indeed, they can point you into the direction of some amazing mental health charities that are in your area that we know that, thank goodness, for them, so that they can help as well. So a lot of things your GP can do.
Thanks, Linda. And coming back to you, Chris, we've got one from Chloe asking you, what made you passionate about working for the Mental Health Foundation?
Oh, great question, Chloe. I had a really tough time at school. I was very badly bullied at school. And then when I was at university, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder and got really into campaigning for good mental health. So everything kind of came together, and I'm really fortunate that I've been able to build a career in a sector where stigma hasn't necessarily been a problem. I've been able to be myself and find my feet and find my recovery. So started with a passion to make things better for people going through similar things to me, and has turned into a really rewarding career in a great organization.
That's really inspiring to hear, Chris. Harry, I will put another one to you. What tips do you have for those who feel reluctant to approach family and friends for help? And that's from Katie.
Well, it's a hard one to answer because it depends what why there's reluctancy. But I guess the most common reason for that would be, you're afraid of admitting that you're not, feeling well mentally, because it's quite a frightening thing. But, I'm lucky enough to have a really supportive and understanding family, like I'm sure most people do. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the reaction that you'd get. And, if you feel that people in that family wouldn't understand you, there are other avenues, finding a doctor that you feel comfortable talking to, that's, or a psychiatrist or whatever it may be. I've sought help, professional help, and there's nothing more comforting than speaking to a professional who is, an expert on the topic and getting that reassurance that you're going to be okay. There's nothing
absolutely
more, honestly, it's just the most, I remember being told for the first time, you're going to be okay, you're not losing your mind, and it was totally overwhelming, So yeah, and actually just going back to what Chris said, it is really touching because, I was lucky. I really enjoyed school and I didn't have any problems with bullying, but I see it the whole time, with speaking to, like I said, our fans, and I was watching something on TV the other day about this guy who was bullied really badly at school, and it's so upsetting. And I think, Chris is a good example, and as was this guy I watched the other day, of there is hope in the future, and to get yourself out of that mental rut that you can find yourself in due to, unfortunately, due to other people. That's almost the most upsetting thing. But, I think, take solace from Chris's example and other people that, you will be all right. I promise you that.
Yeah, it's inspiring to hear, isn't it, from people that have gone through it and come out the other end. Dr. Linda, there's one here for you. I think this is a good one from Kevin saying, I'm not naturally an outdoorsy person, so where's the best place to start?
You know what? Walk around the block. Just kind of do your thing. You're not an outdoorsy person. Do somewhere nearby. Do something nearby home. And perhaps, even sitting at a cafe where you can kind of look outside and kind of have those feelings. For other people, it could be even opening your window, right? So kind of having that sort of distraction where you're not constantly in front of screens. Again, we speak about mental health, but there's also cognitive health that feeds into our mental health. And we know that the blue light from screens disrupts our sleep patterns, disrupts circadian rhythms, and that's going to really have an effect. So what we're looking for when we're talking about get out into the great outdoors, you don't need to do kind of a 10-mile hike at all. It's just about changing that scenery, looking at the trees, sitting out, having a coffee with a friend. I actually was reading recently, I thought this was a great idea about mindful walking, right? So when you are walking somewhere, kind of counting how many breaths you take between each of your steps, right? So I think things like that will kind of help you sort of focus on what you're doing and kind of come away from that sort of, again, purposeful, on-screen, very sort of interest-centered cognitive bias.
Yeah, really good advice as always, Linda. Coming back to you, Chris, we've got one from Mandy saying, how has the pandemic impacted you as a charity?
Thanks, man. The pandemic has been one of the biggest mental health challenges many of us will experience in our lifetime. And as a charity, we focus on prevention. So that's helping people to do more to support their mental health and to understand the things that might challenge it. So as a charity, we've had a lot of work to do. We've been doing research all the way through the pandemic and putting out evidence-based tips to help people to cope. And we've been really lucky that the public have still been supporting us. So financially, we're okay. And that means that we're able to do this important work on helping people who have been most affected by the pandemic to recover, things like the Blue Prescriptions project that Simplyhealth are supporting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. We've got one from Rob. I'll put this to you, Harry. What have you learned about your mental health in lockdown that you'll aim to carry on?
Do you know, one thing I was, as Linda said, you know, there's a lot of focus on mindfulness, and I just couldn't quite sort of get into the whole mindfulness thing. You know, I know my wife finds it hugely beneficial for her mental well-being, and it was something I tried to sort of practice, but I just couldn't really do it. And then the first lockdown, I was, you know, I wasn't so much struggling with anxiety; it was more just low mood and just feeling kind of, you know, like I think like everyone did really, and just a bit frustrated, and I just sort of was just feeling flat and just demotivated. You know, just you weren't able to live. You know, and I managed to order some paint online, and I just started painting one of our rooms, and I just couldn't believe like how all day I was just painting, and how that is a version of mindfulness. You know, just being focused on this really simple task that just enabled my mind to just take a break from itself. And, you know, that's something else I experience when I'm in the garden. You know, I'm not really a keen or knowledgeable gardener, but just cutting the hedge back, or like mowing the lawn, or just picking up the leaves, you know, I find that really mindful and like therapeutic. So
yeah, it's finding those things, isn't it? I got really into puzzles and planting basil. It worked.
It works for you, yeah. And also I've just signed up to play for a cricket club for the first time in my adult life. Like I was hugely passionate about cricket growing up, but then when I joined the band, I just had no time for it. And I've just played like little bits over summers. And then since this pandemic's happened, I'm like, do you know, what do I love in life? Like, what do I really enjoy doing? And I was like, sat there and I was like, I'm going to sign up to this cricket club, you know, because it might sound stupid, but it's just like, I want to do something that I really enjoy, and that will, and also I think distraction's a really good thing sometimes for me with my anxiety and stuff, and actually pushing yourself to go and do other things and having a distraction that takes you out of those ruminations and those things. So yeah, I guess that's for me what works.
And that's good. Enjoy the cricket. Hopefully we'll get some nice weather for it. Oh dear, that's not a great start. And Linda, what about you finally?
I guess for me it was cooking. I've never been a big cook, but my family all live, my extended family live abroad, and I was missing my parents. So I thought it was a really lovely way to connect with my mom, so she could criticize my cooking from afar. It was great. We kind of get on screens, but again, there is something, you know, I think as everyone's pointed out, and Chris and Harry and you know, like there's something meditative about kind of just the single-mindedness of properly cutting an onion, or you know, or picking up leaves, or planting basil, or whatever it is, and I think recognizing that, so kind of just turning off those kind of thoughts is really key.
Guys, unfortunately, we are out of time, but hopefully you found this session really inspiring. I know I have. Thank you so much for all your questions that you sent in. Sorry we didn't have time to get through all of them, but hopefully you've got some really good information from our panelists today. So thank you so much to Dr. Linda Papadopoulos.
Thank you. Great to have this chat.
Thank you. Harry Judd.
Thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you. And Chris O'Sullivan.
Thanks for all your support.
The way people think, and more importantly, talk about mental health has changed for the better, but too many people still suffer in silence. For instance, 1 in 4 will be affected by mental illness, yet almost 2/3 will never seek help. It takes a lot of courage to speak out about your mental health struggles and to ask for support if you need it. Through its healthcare plans, Simplyhealth offers access to online and telephone counselling and advice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To find out more information on these services, you can visit the Simplyhealth website at www.simplyhealth.co.uk. In addition, if you're feeling inspired to harness the power of nature for your long-term mental well-being and are looking for more ideas, download the free Take a Breath ebook today from the Simplyhealth website, where you can find lots of simple everyday suggestions from Harry and the team. Every download also means a £5 donation to the Blue Prescribing Project. We really hope you found this session useful, and thank you all for joining us, for sharing your questions and for listening in this evening.